Namaskar, you're watching this very special edition of DD Dialogue. And why this edition of DD Dialogue is special? Because this we have put together on the sidelines of DD India's very special national campaign, Mask Up India. And in this episode, as we will be joined by the representatives from Government of India, from international agencies like UNICEF and private verticals also, we're going to talk about the post-COVID world, how India is setting up an example in terms of introducing new templates. When we talk about the public health outreach post-COVID, where does India stand? What are the sustainable solutions? What are the challenges ahead? And how India continues to stay much, much ahead of the curve when we talk about containing and controlling pandemic in these unlocked times. And let me quickly introduce my panel on this DD Dialogue editions. We will be, in fact, joined in a short while from now, Shri Rajesh Bhushan, Health Secretary, Department of Health and Family Welfare under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Mr. Bhushan is going to be with us on the show. I'm going to introduce my another very special panelist on the show, Dr. Yasmeen Ali Haq, UNICEF India representative, joining us in our Doordarshan studios here in National Capital. Extremely glad to have on DD Dialogue once again Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai, India Sanitation Coalition Chair, and also former country head HSBC. Thank you so much, Naina Lal Kidwai. And very, very honored to have with us on DD Dialogue, all the way from Hyderabad, Dr. Krishna Reddy Nalimala, Country Director, Axis. It's a health international vertical. It's a think tank, very prominent think tank in health systems. Thank you very much, Dr. Reddy. So glad to have you today making your debut on DD Dialogue series. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Let me quickly start with Dr. Yasmeen Haq. Now, hand washing now seems to be a big focus. On 15th of October, we're celebrating the Global Hand Washing Day. How significant is that in terms of post-COVID era that we are talking about? Many would say that hand washing, well, is that important? But if you look at the numbers, it makes a huge amount of difference when it comes to containing various health infections, and particularly during the COVID times. Opening remarks.
Thank you so much for particularly bringing this special edition, because hand washing is so important. It seems so simple, yet when we look at the number of infections it can prevent, the way it has become core to the COVID-appropriate behavior messages going out, mask up, maintain distance, and keep your hand hygiene. So whether you're a small child or an adult, keeping the focus on washing hands with soap, keeping your hands clean, and really getting this behavior to be part of not just a COVID prevention, but this really is our opportunity to take it forward, because we can't stop this hand washing with soap. It does mean, of course, that how do we enable, what are the bottlenecks to hand washing? And we know in certain areas there's no running water, there's no access to soap, and it brings in that added responsibility that we make sure that in all population groups where they need it, in all schools, in all institutions, we put in place the infrastructure that is needed for hand washing. And importantly, our health centers and for our frontline workers. Think of our ASHA workers, our Anganwadi workers who are in the front line. Have we supported them in them getting the tools that they need for practicing themselves and providing in their facilities where they are? And how do they promote something if it's going to be an expense to people? And find low-cost or no-cost options to them, so that it becomes the new norm. Hand washing can't be a luxury. It's an absolute imperative. It's not a choice.
It's not a choice and a new normal. And Ms. Kidwai, taking this to you now, this is a very important new normal that we have to adopt full-time as a country. And there are some statistics, Ms. Kidwai, very interesting. Impact of hand washing with soap: 47% of the diarrheal diseases are preventable through hand washing, 16% of the respiratory infections, 1.92 estimated return on investment if you talk about the National Hand Washing Behavior Change Program in India, and 40 40% reduction in healthcare-associated infections have been witnessed if one sticks to hand washing. You being the chair of Global India Sanitation, what are the specific measures that your vertical is introducing in this direction, particularly keeping the post-COVID times in mind?
Sakil, let me also lend my voice to the fact that I think it's great that you cover these important subjects the way you're doing at this time. And I just want to also touch on the hand washing issue. And what I'm delighted about is, 4 to 5 years ago, as we started on the Swachh Bharat mission, one of the key aspects of the SBM was also hand washing. In the communication messaging that went out, it went out from institutions like UNICEF, it went out from the government, it went out from many of the NGOs and players that are part of our India Sanitation Coalition, which I'm representing today. And the core messaging there was around sanitation. It was really trying to look at this issue of diarrheal deaths that you mentioned, where we have children still dying of diarrhea. And we know that if we can bring hygiene to the home, if we can bring cleaning of hands to the home, if we can ensure that there are toilets and people use the toilets, the spread of diarrheal disease and death by diarrhea in this day and age goes away. So for many of us, it's like another breath of fresh air, because just as we felt and we were a bit worried that the messaging around SBM, Swachh Bharat, the messaging around hand washing, the messaging around hygiene was beginning to get whittled down.
Is this going to take Swachh Bharat mission? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Many notches above now?
So essentially, Swachh Bharat, the entire messaging correctly began to move towards treatment of sewage, which is still very important and something we must focus on. Because if we just direct all the sewage back into fields or any empty water bodies, because after collection, we don't know what to do with it. And that is, in fact, a worry.
Yes.
The treatment of sewage is critical. And today, even in our cities, about 60% of sewage is not treated. So treatment of sewage is very important. The hand washing agenda, we believed we had achieved some success. And so the messaging around it began to get laid down. And now it's come back as a very important message yet again around COVID. And I'm delighted that that connect is being made. And there's wonderful work that has already been done. So it's very quick to implement because there were jingles, there were plays, there were stories. School children were taught how to wash their hands. It wasn't just wash your hands. It was how you scrub your hands, how you rub them together. And I hope we will also see from the private sector innovations around soaps that need less water.
Very important point there. Let me take this point to Dr. Reddy. Innovations and inclusion of private sector. Dr. Reddy, that's where your vertical comes into picture, and you've done so much of work in this space for the last so many decades. But your thoughts on it, particularly the point of treatment of sewage, is very, very important. So basically, when we talk about the new normal and the new health templates, there are going to be a lot of challenges. What is your assessment, sir? Are we factoring in all that?
Yeah, I think, the hand washing challenge and the sewage treatment challenges, I think the innovations keep coming in. And wherever there is, one of the key challenges, most of the healthcare facilities that we have is absence of running water. It's such a simple thing, but absence of running water. What the solution has been that in terms of instead of running water, we have been adopting the alcohol-based sanitization. And there have been innovations in no-touch alcohol sanitization. So it is a norm now that before we touch a patient and after we touch a patient, that we have to scrub our hands. I think that is a simple thing that can prevent significant number of deaths every year, because we are the culprits in terms of taking infection from one patient to the another patient. So it's the most important from a health worker perspective that they should not become the carrier of an infection, especially the multi-drug infections in a hospital setting. While it is relevant in the hospital setting, I think COVID has brought that the same thing has to be done even outside the hospitals, especially we are used to the urban living where crowded living is common, and we touch surfaces, so we carry the bugs, and most of these bugs are multi-drug resistant bugs. So even the spread of the antimicrobial resistance can be prevented by the simple technique of hand washing plus the face masking.
Okay. And let me come to Dr. Haq, ma'am. The point is that in the last so many months, we've seen many countries, in fact, witnessing the second wave of infections. Not really striking any comparisons, but India did very well in the very first month. But now this unlock and post-COVID, what is UNICEF's assessment? How do you think India has managed to arrest the second wave of infections?
So we're fortunately now seeing that India, even though it has one of the highest number of cases, we're kind of on the downward edge of the dip, and we have to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And that's where the COVID appropriate behavior becomes so important. It's the challenge is not over yet. We still have a ways to go. So it's not just for COVID. If we inculcate this behavior, and I think Swachh Bharat gave us such a good example of how Jan Andolan can help move the needle. So we've moved the needle on sanitation. We need to keep the needle moved on COVID appropriate behavior, which means when the festivals are coming up, as we get into more of the lockdown, we still need to maintain the distance, the masking, and the hand hygiene. And it's repeating these things
Yes.
time and again. And I think for India, the biggest driver is the fact that we have the commitment at the highest level.
Yeah.
We see the Prime Minister himself being very conscious about the three behaviors. We see him sending out the messages periodically, especially now during this period where we're trying to really push forward on it. And that makes a difference. So it's not just a health department or a health worker or a specific agency or ministry. It's really about a whole of society approach. And I'm so happy here you have industry partners with us together,
Yes.
and others who have such an important role to play.
Yes, you talked about partners. Let me quickly go back to Nainalal Kidwai. Sustainable solutions, ma'am, that we are looking at, especially in the sanitation space, where India Sanitation plays a very big role, India Sanitation Coalition. And not only that, the overall response, how has this been? And are there any other national plans also in place?
So, Sagar, I think when we started at the India Sanitation Coalition, it was actually quite a struggle to get industry through what was then CSR budgets engaged in areas that we were engaged in, because they had traditionally really focused on education, schools, health to some extent, but when they saw health, they looked at it more in terms of primary health care at village levels, etc. We had to help them understand that preventive health through right behavior, sanitation, ensuring that people don't fall sick in the first place was important. And we needed them to be part of that journey. And we had some very good successes with companies. And of course, what helped was that the government had this big Swachh Bharat program, and companies did want to engage on that national movement, where for a start, in the villages, in the factories around where they worked, they began to introduce the programs which ensured the elements of Swachh Bharat, included provision of toilets. It, of course, has to be about maintenance of toilets, encouraging use of toilets, treatment of toilet, of where that waste was going, but equally about washing hands, cleanliness, hygiene, and helping through the children, in fact, helping whole families understand why it was important and how it helped with the health of the family. So we began to get traction from industry. But my view is it can't just be about industry and CSR. It has to be in the DNA of every organization that every worker who works in the organization...
Is that a challenge area in Indian context, Dr. Reddy? Ms. Kidwai, the point that she raised. Let's this be a part of the DNA of every organization that can make difference. So here we are talking about the PPP model, which should play a very important role in the post-COVID era, post-COVID ecosystem in health space.
Yeah, it is not only every organization, I would say every individual actually, that unless people become conscious of this effort, it is a collective effort. I mean, the government can only nudge the people, not the organizations, to make it a part of their DNA, that the sanitation, hygiene, the simple social determinants, having access to clean water, access to clean cooking gas. I mean, most of the schemes that are happening, unless people realize its impact on the public health, for example, just a clean cooking gas to every household reduces the lung diseases significantly due to the indoor pollution. The Jal Shakti, I mean, the clean drinking water to every household has the power to reduce or eliminate even the diarrheal illnesses across the country. These are simple things, I mean, the Fit India or Eat Healthy India. These are the essential things that eliminate the lifestyle diseases. I mean, it's starting from the school age. So unless it becomes a part of the DNA of each individual, every organization, government only can facilitate and enable, but the responsibility lies with the citizens.
You talked about schools here. So, Dr. Haq, parents are watching this show and there are genuine concerns because nothing, no matter how much we say and do, nothing can actually replace school learning, classroom learning, classroom teaching.
And it's really important that we look at that aspect of safety for children. It's not just crossing the road. Are there any now
SOPs being made?
So now we have worked very closely with the Ministry of Education, and in fact, the whole 100-day program of getting proper safe provisions in schools has started. Which means kids having access to sanitation, of course, hand hygiene, and looking at how distancing within the protocols within the school can be started, because it's so important. You're so right that no matter how much digital access there is for a child to be going to school, to be socializing, but in a new normal. And I think children learn from school the best. But I also want to highlight, you know, what Naina and Dr. Reddy talked about, the role of private sector. So we've worked very closely with Unilever, who've supplied soap for frontline workers, about 6 million pieces of soap. They provided hand sanitizers. We're working with the company Lixil, who were part of the whole sanitation movement, and they designed a low-cost toilet slab. And now they're looking at low-cost, eco-friendly taps and water systems. Because we also have to remember the environment is so important, and not everywhere do we get running water. So how can we build technology that is eco-friendly, that is aspirational? You know, that's an important part of it.
Let's take this point to Ms. Kidwai, ma'am. These new templates should also factor in rural India, where the set of challenges are absolutely different than what we have in urban clusters. Your thoughts?
You know, Sakal, you're absolutely right. In fact, the interesting thing is, I think rural India got more focused than urban India. It was in some ways easier to resolve because the way we were set up organizationally as a country, strong panchayat, strong community principles, easy to get people to band together, people to understand that they were only as good as the last man standing or last woman standing. And as a result, we found the success, and this was evident in the Swachh Bharat mission outcomes as well, that rural India powered ahead, far ahead of urban India in terms of success and early adoption. So you will find that a lot of the innovation that's coming from industry also in terms of these soaps and products is also quite rural based. But we cannot ignore both. both are important markets and both need to be addressed. And the innovations therein from industry, and it's not, we focus a lot on product, and sometimes we forget that the services are as important. So the innovations must also be around, say, maintenance. So what are the technologies of maintaining a toilet? And it's not the product that goes to cleaning it, but how it's cleaned. How can we replace the manual scavenger by giving that manual scavenger a livelihood which is far more respectable, possibly in the same line? And you see it today, that the pride with which a cleaner at the airport toilet will greet you, the way she wields her uniform, her broom, she's cleaning in a way which is entirely respectable and very, very efficient, because she has the equipment, the training, and the products. So where we have to begin to play a role is to begin to change, and the livelihoods that will come from some of these, I'll call them green jobs, which are critical, the delivery of public services by individuals, by the private sector in for-profit models, will provide the next 20 million jobs that we are seeking to give, because we need these services, and as a government, as a people, we will be prepared to pay for them because they keep us safe.
Okay, let me quickly go to, you made very pertinent point there, the difference when we talk about the behavioral patterns that we get to see in response to containing COVID and post-COVID, Dr. Reddy, the urban-rural divide. Rural India performed better because you had micromanagement being done by panchayats, etc. There is a Sero survey which reveals risk in urban slum is twice that in non-slum areas and 4 times than the risk in rural areas. Now, these statistics, these numbers might change as we move on. But going forward, Dr. Reddy, your thoughts, are we balancing it in a right way? We have disparities, and in fact, those disparities, whether they're economic disparities or cultural disparities, they pose huge challenges. Dr. Reddy.
Yes, I mean, one is in terms of the behavioral patterns of rural India, the lowest socioeconomic groups and the highest socioeconomic groups. We need to be cognizant of these behavioral patterns and the messaging that happens through the media, or the messaging that happens from the political representatives, or the messaging that happens with the opinion leaders. It has to be consistent. I think in today's pandemic of misinformation across social media and various media, it is a greater onus how actually we send the message. I mean, if an opinion leader actually is taking out the mask in a crowd to give a shot to the photos, is sending a wrong message. I mean, this is important in terms of messaging. But more importantly, I think one thing which fortunately that happened from a public health perspective, though it is a lower socioeconomic groups, maybe because they have been challenged to multiple infectious agents in the environment, their innate seems to be stronger. I mean, if you look at the infection fatality rate or asymptomatic infections in the Dharavi slum in Mumbai, the Sero surveillance study,
yes,
the infection fatality rate is very low, and infection to symptomatic cases is almost 100:1. So there is also interesting hypothesis in terms of the immunity, whether you should be exposed to a low incidence of infectious agents for you to develop innate immunity. I mean, just like keeping your police force or the defense force alert when it is engaged in a low-intense war, a low-intense thing. These are interesting findings which I think the ICMR and the public health departments are studying, because they will guide us actually in calibrating how we respond in terms of unlocking or even the future vaccination program as well.
Unlocking, Dr. Haq, it has opened up. Now, India, few months back, we said is gradually opening. Then we said that it is gradually opened. But now this is a new norm. But the new normal is also not in health sector, but the way we communicate now with the masses. Is UNICEF working in that direction also? What I'm trying to ask you, ma'am, is this new normal in communication, public outreach, because unless and until you're not able to drive the message home, television programming doesn't really make sense.
No.
It's actually the ground level where your workers and workers of India Sanitation Coalition and such organizations drive the message, that drive the point.
You're absolutely right that it's not one channel, it's not just mass media, it has to be that interpersonal, but it's also understanding what drives people's behavior.
Yes.
So when we gave out the messages, we reached, hundreds of millions of people with the messages, but then when we went back and checked, are you practicing? We found a high rate of awareness, but the rate of adopting the behavior was low. For
was
example,
it across the society, or
for example,
rural was more, receptive than urban?
But it's a matter of are you able to practice it or not? So, for example, in the urban slums, how do you say distancing?
Yeah.
When people are packed together, they don't have a choice. Their economic situation is such they have to live 6 or 7 people in a room.
Yes.
There's no distancing in their communities because the houses are so tightly packed. Hand washing, running water is not available. So that's where, for us, it was then important to say, all right, let's get some very quick, no-touch hand washing stations, prototypes done, help the community see them, that they can take forward.
Okay.
So it's putting that in, but again, monitoring the behavior. What we have learned from COVID and other pandemics or epidemics is you have to check back whether people are adopting the behavior or not. What do they hear? And that's
what cuts the ice.
What cuts the ice? What is needed to make that behavior change? And are we just giving the messages, or are we explaining it to them? Is the logic going to them? Are we not just expecting them that they adopt it because we say so?
Has UNICEF, UNICEF's assessment of the receptiveness or the acceptance of this new behavior, the new normal, compared to other developed countries? How do you see India's response mechanism? I'm talking about the societal point of view.
Absolutely, and it's who provides the information, who reinforces it, and how do people see it actually affecting their lives? Does it make a difference in their lives or not? And for that, using trusted sources, so it's the same message from different sources, and also from people your community leaders, like your elected members, like school teachers, religious leaders, disc jockey, whoever we need to appeal to for different age groups, because it's not just a homogeneous population.
Yes.
And that's where we've been engaging very closely with the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, who are taking this fledged forward to get the messages through the panchayats, through the sarpanches. It's working with radio, which reaches probably the younger group more, on social media, targeting the practices that we see of young people and those who access social media, but also the folklore, the community radios. So we can't say there's one particular medium. For us, it's really important that we keep getting the message through multiple media and checking back as to how it's being received and where are the bottlenecks in making that behavior change.
Yes. Ms. Kidwai, bottlenecks, checks and balances, and strategies, SOPs will be different for urban as well as different for rural.
So I think it's exactly as Yasmin said, that, we have to be realistic when we set those norms. And she gave the excellent example of an urban slum and social distancing. So the policies we set also have to be workable, and exactly as she highlighted, the facilities for hand washing, water, etc. have to be available before we start saying do this. But I must say, I still think it's so disappointing that we as a people, in something as elementary and simple as masking up, masks which can be homemade, masks which are available for so little, masks which are providing livelihoods to loads of people who are sitting and making them, yet we don't wear them. I mean, if you step out anywhere, whether it's a city or rural India, the pictures are showing that people are just not masking up sufficiently. And to my mind, this is just so disappointing and so irresponsible that we have to continue to drum home that the person who doesn't do it is putting everyone at risk. It is a simple requirement, mandatory, and we should not be ashamed of asking someone to do the needful if they haven't done it. And it's not for a police officer or government to haul up someone. We should be reminding people around us that, hey, put that mask on. And whether you're a shopkeeper or whether you're just a person walking in the street, to ensure that our safety is there. And I think this is something which we are just not a disciplined enough people. And we have to ensure that we can just shame people into doing the right thing if they don't get the message.
Masking up, and I think, ma'am, that is precisely the reason why we at Doordarshan started this national campaign, Mask Up India. This is precisely why we have done it. But Dr. Reddy, there's a very important point important issue flagged by Ms. Kidwai. Masking up will be one of those important factors that has to be now part and parcel of a lifestyle. Have we adopted it, or you still see some challenges? The deterrent, there is no deterrent. I do it, somebody else might not want to do it. Can you impose it, etc.?
Yeah, it has to become a new picture too. I mean, just like the helmets, the seat belts, and the airbags, what happened to the public health? The mask will be for preventing respiratory illnesses, both infection as well as from pollution. If you look at the East Asia or Southeast Asia, the countries which were exposed to SARS-1, as a culture, actually, it became a norm, a new norm for these countries, that any flu season or any rise in the air pollution, they just mask it up. Nobody tells them to mask it up. So it becomes a habit. So until it becomes a habit, I think what the campaign that the DD is trying to do, you have to continuously do a high frequency, low intensity until it becomes a second nature of people. More importantly, I think the innovations will happen to make this mask more comfortable, because one of the reasons people keep taking out the mask, not because they don't want to wear, but also the comfort of wearing it for a prolonged period. For example, I mean, as surgeons, I mean, we wear it for 5-6 hours, but those masks have been customized to make it comfortable even when we are wearing it for 5-6 hours. At the same time, it is effective. So there has to be innovation in masks which are effective as well as comfortable to the wearer, so that it becomes a second nature for people.
Masking up has to be the second nature for people, but then there is much more. Not only masking up. Dr. Haq, let's now focus on the challenges, because you have to sustain these new behavioral patterns.
And I think it's how we trigger social responsibility or civic responsibility. I'm wearing a mask more to protect others than myself.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I might be carrying the virus and not know about it, and putting others at risk. So how we can, in any behavior change, the fact that it can be adopted, the fact that it's accessible, that it's affordable, but at the same time, when we trigger that we are contributing to India remaining low case COVID, that we have a role to play, that we don't see the dip rising again. And all of us have a role to play in this. And how do we do it? Masking, distancing, not getting into crowded places, and hand hygiene. And what we need is to make it structural. Like Dr. Reddy said, that it has to be part and parcel of accepted behavior. So we're seeing, and Naina said, so many women's group, SHGs, have started producing these masks. You know, I have my mask, I color coordinate my mask, because it's possible to do that. It's giving women a livelihood, and I am being responsible to people around me. But it also means that as a country, it has to be institutionalized. So having a roadmap for COVID appropriate behavior, which includes hand washing. This is something WHO and UNICEF are working now with the government to say, how do we institutionalize it? How do we make it a roadmap?
Very important point. How do we institutionalize it, Ms. Kidwai? Very, very important point out there, because that's key to sustenance.
Well, it's like I can tell you in the corporate world, it's just the continuous reminders. It's each individual taking individual responsibility, but also reminding others about it. It's about penalty, but it's also about explaining to people why it's important, so that in fact, when the behavior becomes one where you're ashamed if somebody points out that you didn't have your mask on, you may have taken it off just for that second, but you're ashamed that somebody is even telling you that, that's when we know that the message is spot on, that I have assumed it was my responsibility and I'm ashamed that someone has to tell me I'm not doing the right thing that I should have been doing. And we have to get to that. And for that, communication at every level in a way that people understand is important. And then it's reminders, continuous reminders. I should also add that it's not just about masking up.
Yes.
We have to be able to tell people how important it is to wash that mask regularly, ensure that we don't develop other secondary bacterial infections. So it's all about a whole new piece of clothing, which we have been unused to in the past, and dealing with it in a way that works for us. I think in a corporate setup, also just having like a mask bank where, if you've forgotten one, you dropped it, you dirtied it, you don't have another one, just the ease with which you can have it issued, vending machines with masks. There are so many ways to make sure that we make it easy for people to do the right thing. And yes, it's all about the communication and messaging from the top, right to every person in the universe observing this.
Yes. I'm going to quickly welcome Secretary Health onto the show, Sri Rajesh Bhushan, Health Secretary, joining us on this very special edition of DD Dialogue. Thank you very much, sir. It's an honor to have you with us finally. The overall space that we are looking at, the new template in healthcare, post-COVID, the post-COVID time.
You see, post-COVID would be a bit early to say. Okay. We are still in the midst of the pandemic.
Okay.
Even if for those of us who, talk in terms of peaks and declines, even if you reach the peak of the pandemic, there is half the pandemic to go while you are on your way down.
Yes.
So, therefore, post-COVID is probably a bit early to say.
Okay.
Having said that, let me also say that what COVID has taught us are a few things. Number one, we need to focus on our public healthcare delivery systems, particularly in urban areas and in peri-urban or semi-urban areas. I am not specifically referring to rural areas because so far the impact of the pandemic in the country has been in our urban, peri-urban and semi-urban areas. So therefore, that is one important thing going ahead. And the pandemic has taught us that in spite of excellent secondary and tertiary care hospitals in our urban areas and peri-urban areas, we still are substantially deficient as far as primary health care goes in urban areas and in peri-urban areas. So that is one. The second thing the pandemic has taught us is the advantage of having grassroots healthcare workers. The whole concept of 9.5 lakh ASHA workers,
yes,
more than 3 lakh ANMs, this has come in handy. No other country, to the best of my knowledge, has this kind of a network of grassroots healthcare workers. Since they were there, it was relatively easier to repurpose them to suit or to serve the needs of pandemic surveillance, house-to-house active case search, preparation of records. There are countries that spend almost 17% of their GDP on health, but they do not have this kind of network of grassroots workers.
So that has been an
advantage. They are
advantage.
dependent on insurance, health insurance mechanism. So therefore, such countries were found wanting. Whereas in spite of our large numbers in terms of population, we were able to tackle the pandemic in a far more effective manner.
So in terms of curve, where does India stand now?
Well, you see, in the Union Ministry of Health, we are extremely uncomfortable with the concept of a peak or a curve or a distributed curve, because most of these mathematical models are based on how the virus behaves. And that experience is also limited to last 9 months of observing the behavior of the virus. Whereas such mathematical models are less than adequate when they take into account how communities behave, how governments behave, both the central government and the state government. So therefore, we do have our reservations on curves and peaks. But let me also say that there are certain trends. Today, when we are engaging with each other, it is the 4th consecutive week when day-on-day number of fresh new cases is lower than the day-on-day number of recoveries. So that is a trend.
Yes.
कोई भी जो नंबर 4 हफ्ते तक लगातार बरकरार है, वो हमको ये दिखाता है कि एक ट्रेंड बन रहा है. In addition to that, last 4 weeks have seen a declining positivity trend. The last 4 weeks have also seen a increasing testing trend.
Yes.
अगर आप ज्यादा टेस्ट कर रहे हैं और आपकी पॉजिटिविटी कम आ रही है, तो वो भी एक ट्रेंड है. So these are satisfactory signs, but they should not lull us into complacency. Going ahead, we would be entering into the months of Durga Puja, Ram Leela,
Diwali,
Ravan Dahan, Eid, Christmas, New Year Eve. So these are occasions where crowds would gather. And if we do not deepen COVID appropriate behavior, then we may be looking at a far more complex and complicated challenge.
So how do we consolidate this COVID appropriate behavior moving from here on? Because as you rightly mentioned, sir, that we are looking at the festive seasons and the positive trend that you've been talking about. We've been carrying regular reports on Doordarshan on the basis of the Health Ministry presser. You know, these numbers have been extremely, positive, that country is pretty much safe. But then the template for the future, what would you how would you respond to that? The new template for the new future.
You see, COVID appropriate behavior has to be people driven. Until and unless the society at large understands the need to wear masks, understands the need for physical distance, understands the need for hand hygiene, things will not improve. So therefore, the first lesson is that the danger is still present and potent. So therefore, to tackle a present and potent danger, you need to wear masks, you need to maintain physical distance, you need to avoid crowding, and you need to observe hand hygiene. We have to build this into our daily life, and we have to guard against certain very common tendencies that we see around us.
Like?
The first tendency is that I am healthy, so nothing would happen to me.
Okay.
You may be healthy, but that does not prevent you from getting the virus. And as a healthy infected person, you would be coming home and infecting your parents who are senior citizens.
Yes.
The second tendency is that since I am healthy, I would recover. There are people around me in my neighborhood who tested positive and who recovered in 10 days. So I would also recover. That is also a dangerous attitude, because all such people end up infecting tens of others, and not all of them may be, as healthy as they are. Those infected people may be comorbid. They may have other conditions, for example, cardiac conditions, renal conditions. They may be transplant recipients. So you are not only endangering your life, you're also endangering the life of people at large.
Right.
So one has to guard against these tendencies.
And how do you ensure that these new procedures, systems, or behavioral patterns that need to be imbibed by Janta or by public at large are sustained? So do you think sustaining this is going to be a bit of a challenge in Indian context, given the disparities? Like you mentioned, it was pretty much easy to contain the whole scenario to rural level because of the Panchayati Raj systems that you have in place as compared to the urban slums.
You see, you are right. It's a big challenge, and it's a challenge both in urban and rural areas. I would not make any distinction.
Okay.
In urban areas, if you go to the markets of Delhi, you will still find people crowding. You would still find people not wearing masks. The newspapers would still tell you that every week, 2,000 or 2,500 people were challaned in the Delhi metro. Delhi metro is a very structured environment. So if people in a structured and regulated environment can violate, wearing of mask or maintaining physical distance, so the challenges are great. But at the same time, if we make it a people's movement, then it can be addressed. It has to be done in every mohalla, in every resident welfare association, in all villages. We have a huge network of Panchayati Raj institutions. We have a huge network of urban local bodies. We have women's self-help groups. So all these networks have to be energized. And we have started doing this on 8th of this month. The Honorable Prime Minister started this Jan Andolan campaign on COVID appropriate behavior. And we are more than satisfied to know that the response has been very enthusiastic, and people are proactively coming forward and taking responsibility to strengthen and deepen COVID appropriate behavior.
Okay. And our the other panelists, the esteemed panelists who have been waiting for you to come on board, sir, want to share their thoughts with you. I'm going to quickly start with Dr. Yasmin Haq, UNICEF India representative. Ma'am.
Thank you, and welcome, Sri Bhushanji. It's really, in our previous conversation, you really stressed the point of our needing to understand how people are practicing the behavior. How are we keeping an eye on the behaviors being adopted and being taken forward? And I think this has been a crucial part of our learning, and putting that learning into moving into more platforms. So I think as we forge ahead, as we address the pandemic, as we look at a vaccine becoming available, and then working together, there's going to be another new set of behaviors we will be looking at. And I think the leadership of the ministry is important, as it brings in other ministries too. And I think that's something that for us has been very heartening to see, that it's not just one ministry. The leadership of health is bringing in WCD, Panchayati Raj, Ministry of Education, and other
all
bodies.
All departments together.
All departments.
Yes. Ms. Nairalal Kidwai would also like to share her thoughts with you, sir. Ms. Kidwai.
It's really heartening to hear the focus that has been described, both at the government level, and thank you for sharing all the initiatives. and also lauding the work of, whether it's the ASHA workers or our rural sort of infrastructure in particular, which enabled very quick execution therein. I really would love to hear from you how you see the role of NGOs as well in this. Because at the India Sanitation Coalition, a lot of excellent work was and has been done by NGOs who have helped connect the dots. They come in to fill the gaps. They work closely with the rural communities, but also with rural governments in order to ensure that execution happens.
Yes.
I'd love to hear how we could do better that as we go forward.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bhushan, sir, please respond to that. Role of NGOs, very quickly.
I would entirely agree with the points made by both the panelists. First, the point made by Yasmin about, the challenges that the government faces. Right from the very beginning, we have believed that the pandemic can be tackled only by following whole of the government approach. And then we realized that from the whole of the government approach, we must also transit to whole of the society approach. So that is what we are doing, looking at behavior change. Coming to the point that Ms. Kidwai made about the ASHAs and the NGOs.
Yes.
In the initial phase of the pandemic, when there was large-scale movement of the migrant labor from the more developed areas to UP, to Bihar and Odisha, we found that NGOs played a stellar role, an exceptional role in maintaining the quarantine centers.
Yes.
That was the most challenging time because historically speaking, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh and Odisha suffer from a deficit of health infrastructure. To manage lakhs of migrant labor who were coming and staying for 2 weeks minimum in quarantine centers. So that was one area where NGOs worked hand in hand with the state governments because this exercise was led by the state governments. The second major area where NGOs worked was making this migrant labor aware of their entitlements under Ayushman Bharat.
Yes.
These people were not aware that they could get health care from the states where they had come. These were the states of their domicile. They had left these states and gone to Mumbai or Surat or to Delhi. So once they returned, they needed someone who would handhold them, tell them that if you require health care, these are the hospitals empaneled under Ayushman Bharat. So this was the second major thing that the NGOs did. The third major thing that women self-help groups did, almost hand in hand with NGOs, was to ensure that large-scale manufacture of homemade face covers is done, so that people were not dependent on surgical masks or N95 masks. People could make, these women made crores of masks, homemade cloth covers which are reusable, can be washed and worn and reworn again. So yes, we agree that NGOs played an exceptional role.
Okay, I'm going to also ask or request Dr. Reddy to make a quick point here. Dr. Reddy, sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a specific point on the hospital care.
Yes, sir.
Because this is where I think while we are trying to prevent infection, but it's also equally important when they require hospitalization. One, the need for financial protection, I think, is becoming much more evident, not only for the lower income society, even for the middle class, to get a hospitalization and to require almost a catastrophic health expense. So there has been a thinking, I think, in the PMJ also to expand the coverage to the other so-called missing middle population. Second thing is, while we have to strengthen the public healthcare provision, there is also, I think, need for stewardship over the private healthcare sector because it accounts for almost 60% of healthcare provision. That was evident, actually, that there was no stewardship in terms of containing or partnering or engaging them in being responsible for the public health. I think that is another point I will raise as a part of this panel.
All right.
Since Secretary is here,
yes,
I thought that's an important aspect.
Absolutely. And Shri Rajesh Bhushan, we will wrap it up here, but not without your message for the people of the country, coming in from someone like you, who is at the helm of the affairs. And we know that under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, country is under safe hands. What would be your final message to the viewers of Doordarshan, the national broadcaster?
You see, we must realize that the pandemic can be tackled. Pandemic can be tackled effectively. For that, we need to encourage health-seeking behavior. For that, we need to put in public domain the information of medical facilities and beds available in each medical facility. We need to be far more transparent in providing healthcare services to the people, whether they are in public sector or in private sector. We need to look at the pandemic as a challenge to put our best foot forward. We should not look at the pandemic as a chance to make a quick buck. We should also look at the pandemic as an opportunity to encourage research and development, both in the field of diagnostic tests as well as in the field of treatment. And we have reason to believe that with full cooperation from all stakeholders, we would be in a position to successfully tackle the pandemic going forward.
Going forward, the Government of India is on a very strong footing to tackle the pandemic condition from here on. Thank you very much, Shri Rajesh Bhushan, Health Secretary, Government of India, for joining us on this very special edition of DD Dialogue. And he's signing off with masking up. We're also going to do that in a bit. I'm also going to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Krishna Reddy Nallimala, Country Director, Access Health International, joining us from Hyderabad. Extremely thankful to Ms. Neela Lal Kidwai, India Sanitation Coalition Chair and also former HSBC Country Head, and also big thanks to Dr. Yasmin Haq, UNICEF India representative, for joining us. And we're really running short of time. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. And viewers, as again, we started by saying that this show is together. This show is special because we've put it together on the sidelines of a DD India initiative, Mask Up India, because this is something which is very, very important, not only in terms of protecting yourself, but those you love. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm going to sign it off by wearing my mask, and you should also wear yours. Thank you for staying with us. Namaskar.